You are listening to What It's Like with Luce, a podcast highlighting ordinary people doing extraordinary things. I'm your host Lucy Norris, and on today's episode I'm chatting to CEO and founder of coffee company Minor Figures. Growing up surrounded by Australia's rich cafe culture, this week's guest got his start in the industry when he co-founded everyone's favourite reusable KeepCup with his brother and sister. Responsible for the brand's growth in Europe, he began to immerse himself in the continent's coffee market and in 2014 stumbled upon a gap for nitro cold brew in London. Inspired by what he had seen on travels to Japan, Minor Figures was created with a focus on sustainability and sells only 100% plant-based products. Sharing his thoughts on entrepreneurship, how he built his company, and the impacts of COVID-19 on the coffee industry, here's what it's like to be Stuart Forsyth. Before we get stuck into the episode, I just wanted to say that if there is a drop in sound quality throughout, I'm very sorry, but in respect of social distancing during COVID-19, I've had to record episodes remotely. In this challenging time, we're all trying our best, so I really hope everyone is staying safe and that you enjoy the episode. Welcome, Stuart. Thanks so much for coming on and chatting with me today. I think it would be a really good starting point to go back to the very beginning and chat a little bit about what it was like for you growing up in Australia. Have you always been really entrepreneurial, or is it something that came later?
Growing up in Australia is, you have kind of won lottery in a lot of respects for many reasons. But there's a massive food culture there, which and coffee is a big part of that, particularly in Melbourne. So a lot of people work in hospitality and coffees and cafes in their youth, and certainly I did, sort of travelling around a lot, always heading back to work in a coffee shop and things like that. I wouldn't say necessarily that I was entrepreneurial. A lot of people ask me about being an entrepreneur, and I generally tell them that I carved out quite a cunning plan to become an entrepreneur. Just what my plan was very slowly I cultivated a personality which was not compatible to going to work. And, if I just kept improving that, then surely no one would have me. And then, lo and behold, here I am. I've got to do something for myself. So that's kind of where it started for me.
When it became time to go to university, because you said, perhaps you weren't so interested in doing the 9-to-5 thing, what did you decide to study and why did you decide to go to university?
I went to university and I studied philosophy. I started in commerce, actually, at Melbourne Uni, and I think I did like one semester of it and couldn't stand it. So I ended up just switching my majors entirely to the arts from commerce, and I did English literature and philosophy and really just kind of bummed around. It was a fantastic time, and in and out of travelling and sort of seeing the world. I mean, it must have taken me, I should be a doctor with the amount of time it took me to get my degree. So I spent a lot of time doing that, and again, sort of in and out of working in coffee as well. So I was sort of always tied to this industry a little bit. And then I continued with writing actually for quite a while after that. So I'd written some stuff which, won some awards, and I've even got a book published out in Australia many, many years ago. So,
wow.
It seems like a lifetime ago now, but yeah.
And so before you went into Minor Figures, which is your main business now, you founded KeepCup, is that right?
That's right, yeah. My brother and sister were really the main drivers of it. They had a coffee chain or a cafe chain in Melbourne, and I'd been working in and out of that place for years, and I was in another coffee shop at the time, and basically, we saw the use of disposable cups. It's just pretty mad from the barista's point of view, because you stack up these paper cups every morning and then you see them walk out the door and go straight in the bin in about 2 minutes. Mm-hmm. And you just do that every day, day after day after day. So really, my older brother and sister, they really came up with a plan to create KeepCup. So the business was created in 2009. I think around June 2009, of course, I was there pushing the product, selling the product, and then very quickly the UK or some European bigger chains called us up within months, and I just happened to be going to Europe sort of, as a holiday and as a side thing, and I ended up coming out here, doing the meetings, hanging around, getting product into town, trying to make some sales, and then kind of the rest is history. I could see the sort of beginnings of a specialty coffee community in London at the time, and when I say the beginnings, there was probably only a handful of coffee shops in London at the time, less than 10 you would probably get your coffee at. Mm-hmm. Again, they were baristas who were Aussies and Kiwis and had sort of come from that part of the world, so they sort of were driving this I guess this cafe culture as much as anything, this style of coffee and this style of enjoyment in cafes, which has really been a big export. Actually, you can find them all over the world, to be honest. That sort of, and a flat white is an export of a sort of Australian and Kiwi coffee culture as well. So, in the UK now you get a flat white in Greg's. In 2009, as I said, there was a handful of coffee shops. If you were going to a friend's house, you sort of had to say, look, I've got to go get a coffee. It's going to take me 20 minutes to get across town. I'll come and see you in the afternoon. And then we've seen the explosion of that specialty coffee in London itself. So the whole market and category's taken off.
You were kind of getting very heavily involved in KeepCup and an instrumental part in that brand translating across the global market. Why did you decide to then go out on your own and found Minor Figures?
Well, I had invested and was part of the UK business, so I ran the sort of UK and European hub for about 7 years. Mm-hmm. And I think just working with family is always, tough. Everybody has sort of different opinions of things, and that was one of the reasons. The other reason is that the business had got to a stage where it probably could have done with somebody leading it who was more skilled than I was at the time. So, if you're talking about, really entrepreneurial stuff, like from going zero to 1 on the scale with very little money, then someone like me is pretty good at that. But once we get down to turning over quite a bit of money, we had a big team, and I was back looking at spreadsheets again, and I wasn't that passionate about that. So that was also one of the reasons. So it was probably a combination of things, and also I was about to have a baby, so there was a whole bunch of reasons why I was thinking about getting out. I was also thinking I'd also started another business in the meantime, so I was actually quite passionate about sustainability, and this product was a bit of a new product in the same mold as KeepCup, which was actually looking at disposable chopsticks.
Oh, cool.
And it was a design solution for that. Yeah, it was really interesting, and I was doing some really innovative stuff with it. I'd work with a design company here in London called Sprout. Mm-hmm. Guy Robinson was the industrial designer's name. So we had created this really nice set of chopsticks, and we were actually collecting used chopsticks, grinding them into a flour, compounding that with a bio-resin, which was fully compostable, and then injection molding them. The brand name is Ditoki, which was even challenging to name chopsticks, because even chopsticks is technically a bit of a racial slur in some ways, and obviously chopsticks is called different things right across Asia. Now, we had a big market in Japan for KeepCup, so that was where I was sort of aiming at it with our distribution partners over there. Okay. But we did a lot of work on that, and then actually some tragic stuff happened. The place where we were compounding the material, it actually caught fire and burned down, and actually a couple of people died, and at the time, and then my injection mold went into receivership pretty much all within the space of a few months. So I'd lost quite a lot of material. I didn't have an injection mold, and I basically ran out of cash. That was a project which never really got off the ground, although my brother is sort of fooling around with the Ditoki name now, and he's got some products out, which is fantastic.
Yeah, that sounds insane. I'm so sorry to hear that, all of that kind of went down afterwards, but that initial idea is really cool. Your interest in sustainability and things, is that kind of why you wanted to create a 100% plant-based company?
I would like to say I was that smart, but the truth is that I was really interested. I'm always interested in sustainability, and Minor Figures is about to make some quite serious pledges around what we are, the roadmap for us over the next sort of 2 to 3 years. I've been working on that recently, so that we're making some significant, investments into sustainability, which I think is business critical now. I don't think it's a nice to have. I think you kind of need to do that. But I've always had that passion. Separately to that, I don't really take milk in my coffee. So when I was creating an iced coffee company, and that's really what it was, Australia has a history of sugary, milky, kind of dirty and delicious iced coffees. But I wanted to create something that was made by a sort of coffee professional, kind of a roaster or a brand name or something that, you could trace the coffee right back to the farm and things like that. There was sort of provenance and simplicity and all these things. So when I started the journey, cold brew was sort of kicking off in America. I think Stumptown had just released their first stubby, which was a bit of an inspiration for the whole category. And we went down that road originally, which was to create a black iced coffee, which was an interesting process. And then because, black coffee is just not that popular across Europe, we were looking for something to put in it. We'd looked at all sorts of things. We even flirted with dairy and coconut and a bunch of things. And then in the background, we're working on an oat milk. We'd been working on it for a year to get it right, particularly get it right for coffee. So once we'd cracked that, the business Minor Figures was at a stage where we could change our packing lines because we'd got enough distribution to produce bigger runs, and we had a chance to rebrand and do a few things. So we sort of rebranded, went all plant-based 2 years ago, and the product's done really well ever since.
Yeah, I love your oat milk. It's actually in my fridge right now. But
nice.
I think it's fair to say that your company has some of the most innovative, kind of eye-catching branding that I've ever seen. So how did you bring about that idea and create that buzzworthy brand around your iced coffee?
Well, the brand itself has gone through a couple of iterations, and probably if I was to give my version of being an entrepreneur, and I think you've got to be careful with advice because everybody does it differently, but certainly the only way I know how is just to bite off more than you can chew and then chew like hell. So we would go to market very quickly with whatever we could and just iterate in market once we get going. So I know that a lot of people do it. Some people are a little more precious with getting the things perfect, and there's probably a better balance than me. Certainly I tend to just bite down on the mouthpiece and go for it, regardless of how many times I'm going to get hit in the head. So in terms of the branding, we originally launched Minor Figures under a slightly separate looking brand. That brand was more of a 50s sort of retro fit. We were in a Tetra Pak at the time. There was a few other things going on. And interestingly, perhaps for you guys, there's sort of an Easter egg in some of our branding now. And what we did was we based our design on the Kamigawa River, which was the river in Kyoto. And I think I like to tell the story when I was in Japan probably 20 years ago. I was on the Kamigawa River, and there's all the Ouija sort of drippers, all the cold brew drippers that sit in the cafes. Mm-hmm. And I think I first had my first cold brew there, and I thought, God, this is absolutely awful. This thing is never going to take off. There's no way anyone will drink this stuff. It was just terrible. And then here I was 20 years later with a cold brew company, or myself and the founders with a cold brew company. And so that became a bit of an inspiration. So the original pack, and Kamigawa River translates to duck river or wild duck river. Okay. And so you'll notice in all of our branding and all of our stuff that we always sort of have ducks in it. And there's actually a lot of Easter eggs. So they're in everything. We sort of hide ducks through all of our branding, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, no, I love it. I think it's so fun and it's so unique. You definitely know, looking at one of your coffee cans or your milk, that it's a Minor Figure product. So I guess kind of leading on from that, you probably get asked this so much, but I'm going to ask it anyway. How did you come up with the name?
We do get asked that all the time, actually. We tell a lot of lies about it. I don't think anyone ever tells the truth about the name. So I'm not going to tell you how we came up with it. But what I will say is that going back to the branding, what was quite nice, and the reason why we chose the current branding we're in is that there was this original sort of play that we would become the minor sort of player in a iced coffee, and perhaps we would choose other roasters and other coffee professionals to come onto our platform. So the business might have started as a bit more of a platform for other people. And we realised very early on that was just a ridiculous idea. That was not possible. We kind of, and the name sort of comes from a whole bunch of sources really. But one thing that's nice about the current branding is that it has all these sort of characters on it. And these, what you call these minor figures. So, I mean, minor figures is a very people-centric business, and we sort of celebrate all the eccentricities and strangenesses of people. And our approach to it isn't like most startups or, challenger brands. Challenger brands tend to be very punk. They tend to pick a target and be very aggressively against it. You can think of almost everyone. I won't name all the brands. Probably the brand which is most famous for its Brewdog. They go after big breweries and things like that. But every startup you name has sort of got this punk attitude. And Minor Figures is a bit more funk than that. We just sort of play a groove and hope people come dancing with us. So it's quite hard to define and a bit hard to explain, and for the customer, but also for us internally. We've created this thing which is sort of strange and interesting and very hard to box in, and we're not like some of these companies like Rise and Grind, and have all these slogans about get out and hustle and all this sort of stuff. And I think, look, Minor Figures' philosophy is, look, if you want to watch TV all day, mate, we're totally behind you. We are 100% into that. And if you want to go and smoke bongs and just lie in the park, well, we love that too. But if you want to go and take over the world, we're behind that as well. Like, whatever floats your boat is the sort of philosophy that we're getting behind, which is pretty interesting to try and articulate as a brand and as a company, that whatever you're doing right now is good for you, man. So,
and you kind of quickly became quite a luxury product, and I know you ended up in the likes of Selfridges and places like that. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah.
How did you do that?
Again, I think probably a piece of advice for other entrepreneurs is sort of know where you need to start with your products, and probably in the early days be more cautious than not. For us, it was important, just as a really bootstrap startup, that we sort of went into Selfridges first. We gave them the opportunity, because if you don't go to them first, they won't take it, really. People like them, and it could be anything, whatever your product is or category is. Now we would not really consider that, if we had have had more money and launched knowing we were in a category that was going to fly, and perhaps we launched with the oat milk product and 5 years ago, the vegan movement was not where it is today, in the plant-based movement. I mean, it's almost, even for us who are in the game and in the market, and we promote a plant-based lifestyle with all of our staff, we couldn't have guessed it. I mean, we didn't pick it, that it would have come on so fast and so strong. So with a product launch, you have to launch in the right spots, and Selfridges is just one of those marquee names that then helps you sort of go down the chain or go along the chain to get to reel others in. So it was nice to get, and obviously the products sell well there and they get seen there. But we talk about sort of rushing in and the sort of MVP, the minimum viable product, sort of getting it to market as soon as we can. That we went into Selfridges with our original product, and I think we went from kind of more or less working out who could produce it for us, and I don't think we'd even worked out how to even brew the amount of coffee we needed to brew, and nobody in the specialty market was producing the amount of coffee. I think it was like, at the time, it was like 7,000 or 8,000 litres we needed to produce.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to invent the brewer, invent the packaging, do everything. And I think from that moment, from sort of starting the company to going on the shelf at Selfridges, was something like 8 weeks. We hadn't even had branding. We didn't even have a name. So, I mean, that's just the sort of, you just sort of block out the distractions and just kind of go for it.
Fake it till you make it, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's also, I've used it before. You kind of got to be a bit nasty. So you got to be nasty against your competition. You got to be nasty with your own ideas as well. If they don't work, you got to get rid of them really quick. You gotta be very critical and quite mean, particularly in the early days.
And do you have a secret to a great pitch?
Oh no, I'm absolutely horrible. I would never hope to tell anyone how to pitch. Again, like I'm not like there are people who are specialists and very good, but most entrepreneurs, the two things I'll say again, probably for advice is most entrepreneurs, they're very passionate about their product, and that goes a massive long way. So, I mean, I don't think I could tell a lot of things, but I certainly think that what we're doing is relevant and has a place. And because of all the hard work that's gone into actually, because we're the makers of it all, we sort of put the billion hours, sweat hours into it. So I can certainly go and pitch that very hard. And then the other thing I would say perhaps is, again, it's about sort of knowing where you stand and your limitations. But with entrepreneurs or small brands, most of the time you are never going to find a better salesperson than you because of that. You can always find an accountant or a bookkeeper or, somebody to do a more practical piece, but just somebody who's willing to go the extra inches, like day after day, and, be out on the road and getting, effectively kicked in the stomach by everyone telling you no.
Yeah.
You're never going to find someone as passionate about it as you. So in the early days, you've got to make that it's good to make that if you're absolutely terrible at it, you're going to have to find another way, but it's good to try and work on that and make that your strength.
What do you think that the future holds for your business? I've seen that you've been doing a lot of great work to help small businesses during the COVID pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, it's good you've seen that, actually. I'm happy that's happened. I mean, it's a funny one for Minor Figures. As I said, our brand is so esoteric and just so many things, and we only really know, we can only really define our brand by when someone does something wrong. It's like they say something, or a post goes up, or something happens, and we're like, oh, that's not really, doesn't sound like us. We never really know what we are. So we've never really gone about advertising and marketing and sort of telling everyone about ourselves, because we've never kind of found the sort of feeling that was right, that was authentic enough. Mm-hmm. And then really when this happened with the corona, I mean, these cafes, they're not only our customers, but a lot of them are our friends. So we were having really hard conversations with people who were shutting down their cafes, maybe for good. I mean, they will probably come back in the UK, but I mean, everyone's going to have such a hard time over the next 2, 3, 4 years, even as this thing sort of gets back up, if it ever does. Yeah. So we were really passionate about helping them out, and almost like lit a fire under us to get going. So, of all the things we've done, we online, if you buy from us online, we give 5% of the sale to your cafe. You nominate them in the sort of notes box. We have done free days, so we kind of purchase all the coffees all the oat milk coffees on a Friday. You kind of book in and get yourself in, and we'll help advertise your cafe. We'll actually sort of geolocate your cafe, and we'll advertise the day for you to try and drive more people into your store. We've done the roasters, so all the roasters who are our friends, they've got no wholesale business because the cafes are closed, so we've brought them onto our site to try and sell through those. So we really found a voice kind of in our community, sort of helping people, and I think that's really important. When I look around at the competition, there's sort of coffee or alternative milks, or we have a range of different competitors because we're across a few categories, but they've been a bit flat-footed and a bit stale. Like, I don't know, they haven't quite grasped what's happened to this industry, the hospitality, which is absolutely devastating. So we've been there and we'll continue to be there right through this moment, and hopefully when we come out the other side, we can continue to support these guys.
Yeah, I think it's really great what you're doing and how kind of quickly you've tried to look for a solution to the problem rather than, I guess, dwelling on the fact that, you don't know what the future holds and kind of the uncertainty of it.
I was super proud of the team for it. I mean, it's interesting that we sort of sprang to life on that. I think it's great. And for our business as well, like we obviously, a lot of our business goes through the cafes. That's our predominant revenue stream. So we lost that entire stream. So we didn't know whether we were even going to make it when we were sort of proposing a lot of these things to help others. But we kind of had this mentality that we're all in this together. Look, if they don't survive long term, then it's going to be hard for us. So we need to help them now, even if it's very painful for us at the moment as well. So, yeah, feels sort of right, feels authentic, it feels genuine, So I'm really happy.
And I think it's pretty evident to anyone listening that you've definitely experienced success throughout your career. So do you have kind of your own personal definition of what that word means to you?
Yeah, I don't know. No, I'm not sure what that is actually. I never thought about it, to be honest. I mean, well, I'm not in the business, and to make $1 squillion, I never really have been. So, when people come into my fix, they probably know I'm, a bit of a lunatic and really passionate about sustainability. So I'm probably going to try and do something in that space, and that would be where my sort of next passions lie, to go back really more heavily into sustainability. So in terms of success, yeah, there's so many metrics of it, there's so many measures of it. I mean, just having a business and where we're at now in our business, which is sort of we're in a scaling part of it rather than the startup part, it seems to be successful, to get through that 0 to 1 stage is just so unlikely for any business.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the truth. So, people say to me, I've been an entrepreneur, or I want to start my own business. And I say, look, don't. Just go work for someone else. Just enjoy your life. You just have to go home at 5 p.m. You don't have to worry about it. As soon as you start on this path, you can't go back.
Yeah.
And then you're screwed. You're in it forever. And it's just heartache after heartache. So,
but you have a really cool product at the end of it that you can be so proud of. So I guess it's kind of worth it.
Yeah, I think that's it too. Like, I think it depends what your philosophy is and why you're getting into stuff. And, there's all the cliches about, I don't know, like sort of being passionate about it and not thinking to the end goals. And I think that's kind of what we do. I mean, the thing, like, I guess this current corona situation, may even change that a lot, like...
Yeah.
There's a lot. This is a very complex situation we're going through, and actually, I'm more on the side. We discussed probably before this started, but I'm more on the side of, some strange sort of libertarian ideas, and I'm concerned with the government overreach that they can just tell people to go inside, not go to work, trash their own lives, and everyone just complies. Strangely, and there's nothing peer reviewed. There's no sort of discussion. There's nothing about it. Now, I think it was done for the right reasons, of course. So I'm not saying that, but like there's some very strange stuff. And one of the things is, like, if you're living in China or Wuhan or even Venice, and you see the canal in Venice with dolphins in it, and you're in China and you suddenly can, go out and see the blue sky and breathe the air, maybe you don't want to turn the machines on again.
Yeah.
Maybe you're like, oh, mate, this is all right. Maybe I'll just, can't we work out a way to keep this fresh air thing? Quite like it.
Yeah, I know.
So all those definitions are being sort of perhaps rewritten, and I really hope they are. I mean, I really hope we don't go back to what we had. I mean, I really hope there's a new path that emerges.
And then, Stuart, my last question, and I'm going to let you get on with your afternoon. If I put your 10-year-old self sitting in front of you today, having been through everything you've been through, both in business and then in your personal life, what's the biggest piece of advice you would give your 10-year-old self moving forward in life?
Oh, my God. I never think like that, I always think sort of left foot, right foot, breathe in, breathe out.
Yeah.
Make sure I got the fundamentals down. I think, let me think. I would say... Maybe this is the wrong way to answer this, but I was thinking about this. I was talking about this to my girlfriend the other day, which was, I would encourage them to play sport. I would say that you need to play sport a lot and take it very seriously, because it is one of the few moments in your life when the score will be clear at the end. And what will happen is, when you are young, you'll be forced to face your own limitations and look them right in the eye. And you won't be able to escape from them. You're either going to be good enough to keep going and play football or rugby or cricket or whatever you want to play, snooker or darts, who cares? You'll either be good enough to keep going, or someone's going to say, you're not good enough. Now's the time to stop. And I think that those sorts of lessons that are very stark and black and white, and the pleasure of just having the game end and knowing whether you won or lost, because life just goes on as a bit of a rumbling mess. I think the pleasure of that is something that is interesting. So understanding your limitations early and being forced to, look yourself in the eye is probably something which I think is worthwhile. Now, you could do that through a whole heap of ways, but I guess sports maybe a gentle way to do that.
Yeah, no, I like that. That's a really interesting way of looking at sport. I just want to say thanks so much for coming on and chatting with me. It's been super interesting talking to you.
Not at all. It's been a pleasure, and good luck to you.
Thank you so much for listening, and as always, please rate, share, and leave a comment if you like what you hear. And don't forget to follow @whatitslike_pod on Instagram and Facebook. For more information on minor figures, visit the links provided in the show notes. I'll be back next week with more inspiring stories, but for now, this has been What It's Like with Luz.